The morning sun of Nexus Prime cast long shadows across the crystal towers of the Galactic Academy. Students from dozens of different worlds hurried through the floating walkways, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes against the pristine white buildings. This was the most prestigious learning institution in known space, where only the brightest minds from advanced civilizations earned the right to study. Zara adjusted her silver robes and checked her reflection in the polished wall. Her blue skin gleamed with the natural luminescence that marked her as one of the Kethrin people. Two delicate antennae emerged from her forehead, twitching slightly as they detected the electromagnetic fields around her. The Kethrins were known throughout the galaxy as the masters of technology and science. They had conquered faster-than-light travel when most other species were still discovering agriculture. She walked into advanced quantum physics with her head held high. This was her favorite class where she consistently scored the highest marks. The professor, Dr. Vex, was a respected Kethrin scientist whose research had revolutionized space travel. Zara took her usual seat in the front row, surrounded by her friends from her home world. "Did you hear?" whispered Neela, her closest friend. "They accepted a human this semester." Zara's antennae twitched with curiosity. "A human? From that backwater planet Earth?" "The very same," said Kel, another Kethrin student. "I heard they only discovered space travel a few decades ago." "Can you imagine?" The three friends giggled softly. The idea of such a primitive species studying alongside them seemed absurd. Humans were barely more advanced than the cave-dwelling species they had studied in their xenobiology classes. Dr. Vex entered the classroom, his long coat flowing behind him. "Good morning, class. Today we begin our study of quantum entanglement and its practical applications in communication technology." He paused and looked toward the door. "We also have a new student joining us." A figure stepped through the doorway and Zara felt her jaw drop slightly. The human was taller than she expected, with short brown hair and pale skin. He wore the standard academy uniform, but somehow it looked different on his alien frame. He had only two eyes positioned in the front of his head, and no visible sensory organs beyond basic ears and nose. "This is Ben," Dr. Vex announced. "He comes to us from Earth and has shown remarkable aptitude in theoretical physics. Please make him feel welcome." Ben walked to an empty seat near the middle of the room. As he passed Zara's row, she noticed how he moved. There was something different about his gait, something that seemed both careful and ready for action. She dismissed the thought quickly. What could a primitive human possibly have to be ready for in a civilized academy? Dr. Vex began his lecture on quantum mechanics, explaining complex mathematical formulas that described how particles could be connected across vast distances. Zara took notes efficiently, her enhanced Kethrin mind processing the information at incredible speed. She glanced back at Ben and smirked. He was writing by hand in a physical notebook, like some ancient scholar. When Dr. Vex asked for volunteers to solve a particularly difficult equation, Zara's hand shot up immediately. She stood and approached the holographic display, her fingers dancing through the air as she manipulated the three-dimensional mathematical models. The solution came together beautifully, earning appreciative murmurs from her classmates. "Excellent work, Zara," Dr. Vex said. "Your understanding of quantum field theory continues to impress me." Zara beamed with pride as she returned to her seat. She caught Ben looking at her work and saw him frown slightly as if confused by something. The sight filled her with satisfaction. Of course, the primitive human couldn't understand her advanced calculations. After class, Zara and her friends gathered outside the lecture hall. They spoke in their native Kethrin language, their voices creating melodic harmonies that their species used for complex communication. "Did you see how lost he looked?" Neela said, her antennae flickering with amusement. "I almost felt sorry for him," Kel added. "Imagine trying to understand quantum physics with such a limited brain." Ben walked past them, carrying his primitive notebook. Zara called out to him in standard galactic. "Hey, human." "Ben, right?" He stopped and turned to face them. "Yes, that's me. I'm Zara. I couldn't help but notice you seemed confused during the lecture. Quantum mechanics can be very challenging for species that haven't evolved proper cognitive enhancement." Ben's expression remained neutral. "I think I followed most of it." The Kethrin students exchanged glances. Zara's antennae twitched with what she thought was kindness. "If you need help understanding the basics, I'd be happy to tutor you. I know it must be overwhelming coming from such a simple world." Earth isn't that simple, Ben replied quietly. Kel laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Compared to Kethra, your people only just discovered fire a few thousand years ago. We've been traveling between stars since before your species existed. That's not exactly true, Ben said. But I understand why you might think that. Zara found his calm response frustrating. She had expected him to be defensive or ashamed. Instead, he seemed almost patient, as if he was used to being underestimated. Well, she said, her tone becoming sharper. I'm sure you'll figure out where you belong soon enough. These classes are designed for advanced minds. Ben nodded politely. I'm sure they are. I'll see you tomorrow. He walked away, leaving the three Kethrans staring after him. Zara felt oddly unsatisfied by the interaction. She had expected more of a reaction from someone who had just been so thoroughly put in their place. The next few weeks followed a similar pattern. In every class, Zara excelled while Ben struggled with the advanced concepts. At least that's how she saw it. He rarely spoke up during discussions, and when he did, his questions seemed oddly basic. When they covered stellar navigation, he asked about manual backup systems. During their study of exotic matter, he inquired about what would happen if the containment systems failed. Why do you always ask about worst-case scenarios? Zara asked one day after Ben had questioned their professor about emergency protocols. It's good to be prepared, Ben answered simply. Prepared for what? We have safety systems that are more advanced than your entire civilization. Ben looked at her for a long moment. Safety systems can fail, Zara laughed. Not Kethran safety systems. We've been building technology for millennia. We know what we're doing. I'm sure you do, Ben said. But there was something in his voice that made Zara frown. Their first major assignment was announced. In the middle of the semester, Dr. Vex wanted students to work in pairs to design a theoretical faster-than-light communication system. Zara was excited to work with Neela, but the professor had other plans. I'm assigning partners randomly, Dr. Vex announced. This will help you learn to work with different species and thinking styles. Zara's heart sank when her name was paired with Ben's. She approached him after class, trying to maintain her composure. I suppose we're working together, she said. Looks like it, Ben replied. When would you like to start? Zara pulled up her schedule on her wrist device. I have time this afternoon. We can meet in the advanced research lab. Try not to touch anything important. They met in the lab 3 hours later. Zara had already begun working on the theoretical framework, her fingers flying through holographic displays as she built complex mathematical models. Ben sat beside her with his notebook, watching her work. So, Zara said without looking at him, I've already designed the basic quantum entanglement matrix. It should allow for instantaneous communication across any distance. All we need to do is work out the power requirements and stabilization protocols. Ben studied her work carefully. This is impressive. Zara felt a brief surge of pride before remembering who was praising her. Thank you. I suppose it must look quite advanced from your perspective. It is advanced, Ben agreed, but there's a problem with the quantum cascade you've designed. Zara finally turned to look at him. Excuse me? Ben pointed to a section of her calculations. Here in the third-dimensional matrix. The quantum states you're trying to maintain would collapse under normal space-time conditions. You'd need a stabilizing field that requires more energy than most stars produce. Zara stared at him. That's impossible. I've checked my calculations 3 times. I'm sure you have. But the fundamental assumption about quantum permanence in this model is flawed. Heat rose in Zara's chest. How dare this primitive human question her work? She pulled up the calculations again, ready to prove him wrong. But as she looked more closely, she began to see what he meant. The quantum cascade would indeed collapse almost immediately. She began, then stopped. Even if that's true, how would you know? Your species barely understands basic physics. Ben was quiet for a moment. Then he reached for her holographic display. May I? Zara nodded, too shocked to refuse. Ben's hands moved through the display and she gasped. His modifications were elegant and simple, solving the cascade problem with a solution that was both beautiful and practical. More importantly, his understanding of the underlying physics was flawless. How? Zara whispered. Ben looked uncomfortable. I've always been good with math. This isn't just math. This is advanced quantum theory that most species can't master even with cognitive enhancement. You're human. You're supposed to be primitive. Maybe your information about humans isn't complete, Ben suggested gently. Zara stared at him, her antennae twitching rapidly with confusion and frustration. Everything she knew about the universe said this was impossible. Yet the evidence was right in front of her. She spent the rest of the evening working with Ben, and to her growing amazement, he contributed equally to their project. His insights were creative and practical, approaching problems from angles she never would have considered. By the time they finished, their design was far superior to what she could have created alone. "I don't understand," Zara said as they prepared to leave. "If humans are this intelligent, why is Earth considered a backwater world?" Ben gathered his notebook. Maybe intelligence isn't the only thing that matters for galactic development. What else could there be? Ben paused at the door. "You'd be surprised." That night, Zara lay in her dormitory room staring at the ceiling. Her worldview had been shaken in a way she didn't know how to process. Everything she had been taught about humans suggested they were barely above animal intelligence. Yet Ben had not only understood her advanced work, but had improved upon it significantly. She activated her personal computer and began searching for information about Earth and human civilization. What she found was disturbing and confusing. Earth was indeed a primitive world by galactic standards. They had no faster-than-light travel, no energy shields, no artificial gravity. Their technology was centuries behind even the most basic galactic civilizations. Yet there were odd notes in the files, references to something called Death World Classification, mentions of extreme survival, adaptation. Several reports marked with warnings about caution when interacting with human subjects. Zara frowned. Why would anyone need to be cautious around humans? They were primitive and weak. Weren't they? The next morning brought an announcement that changed everything. Dr. Vex stood before the class with an expression of excitement. "Students, I have wonderful news. The Academy has approved a special survival simulation exercise for this class. You'll be testing your knowledge of physics and engineering in realistic alien environments." Excited murmurs filled the room. Zara felt her pulse quicken. This was exactly the kind of challenge she excelled at. "You'll be divided into teams and placed in different simulated environments," Dr. Vex continued. "You'll have basic equipment and must survive for 72 hours using only your knowledge and skills. This exercise will count for 30% of your final grade." Zara glanced back at Ben. He was listening intently, but she noticed something different about his posture. He seemed more alert, more focused than she had ever seen him. The simulation environments will include ice worlds, desert planets, toxic atmospheric conditions, and high-gravity scenarios, Dr. Vex explained. Each team will face different challenges, but all will test your ability to apply theoretical knowledge in practical situations. As the professor continued explaining the rules and safety protocols, Zara found herself studying Ben more carefully. There was something in his expression that she couldn't identify. It wasn't fear or excitement like the other students showed. It was something else entirely. Something that looked almost like anticipation. The simulation would begin in 3 days. As students filed out of the classroom, chattering excitedly about the upcoming challenge, Zara made a decision. She was going to prove once and for all that humans were the primitive species she had always believed them to be. In a survival situation, where advanced technology couldn't save him, Ben would finally show his true limitations. She had no idea that she was about to discover exactly how wrong she had been about everything. 3 days later, Zara stood in the simulation preparation chamber, adjusting her environmental suit. The advanced Kethrin technology would monitor her vital signs and provide basic atmospheric protection, but everything else would depend on her knowledge and skills. Around her, other students made final preparations for their assigned scenarios. Dr. Vex approached her team, which included herself, Ben, Neela, and 2 students from other species. "Your team has been assigned Environment 7, he announced. An ice world with extreme weather conditions, limited resources, and dangerous wildlife. The temperature will range from -40 to -70 degrees. You'll have basic tools, emergency food for 1 day, and standard environmental suits." Zara felt confident. Kethrin technology was built for extreme environments. Their suits had advanced heating systems and energy shields. This would be easy. She glanced at Ben, expecting to see fear or worry on his face. Instead, he was checking his equipment methodically, testing each piece with careful attention. His movements were precise and purposeful, unlike the nervous energy the other students displayed. Teams. Enter your simulation pods, Dr. Vex called out. The world shifted around them as the simulation activated. Suddenly, Zara found herself standing on a vast plain of ice and snow. The wind howled across the landscape, carrying stinging particles that rattled against her helmet. In the distance, jagged mountains rose like broken teeth against a gray sky. Wow, Neela breathed, her voice crackling through the comm system. This is intense. Their team materialized around a small pile of basic supplies. Simple tools, rope, emergency rations, and basic shelter materials. No advanced technology, no energy weapons, nothing that would give them an easy advantage. Okay, Zara said, taking charge as she always did. We need to establish shelter first, then locate water and additional food sources. The simulation will last 3 days, so we need to plan carefully. The other team members nodded and began examining the supplies. Zara activated her suit's environmental scanner, but the readings were confusing. The extreme cold was interfering with the sensors. My scanner isn't working properly, she announced. The electromagnetic interference is too strong. Mine too, Nyla agreed, tapping her wrist device. Ben was kneeling by the supplies, but he wasn't using any electronic equipment. Instead, he was looking at the landscape, studying the wind patterns and the way snow had accumulated around rocks and ridges. What are you doing? Zara asked. Checking wind direction and looking for shelter sites, Ben replied without taking his eyes off the terrain. See how the snowdrifts form? That tells us the prevailing wind patterns, and those rock formations over there might provide natural windbreaks. Zara stared at him. How do you know that? Basic survival knowledge. Before she could ask more questions, a new crisis emerged. Neela's environmental suit began beeping urgently. Something's wrong with my heating system, she said, panic creeping into her voice. Zara checked her own suit and felt her heart sink. The heating elements were struggling against the extreme cold. The advanced Kethrin technology that she had counted on was failing in conditions it wasn't designed to handle. We need to get to shelter immediately, she said. Our suits won't last long in this cold. Ben was already moving. He had pulled several items from the supply pile and was walking toward a cluster of rocks. Follow me, he called back. And bring the tarp and rope. Where are you going? Zara demanded, but she followed anyway, her suit's warnings becoming more urgent with each passing minute. Ben reached the rocks and began working with incredible speed. He wedged long poles between the stones, creating a framework. Then he stretched the tarp over it, using the rope to secure everything against the howling wind. Within minutes, he had created a shelter that blocked the worst of the weather. Get inside, he ordered, and the team crawled into the improvised structure. The difference was immediate. The wind stopped cutting through their suits, and the temperature inside began to stabilize. Zara's suit systems gradually stopped their urgent beeping. How did you do that so fast? She asked. Ben was already working on the next problem. He had gathered dry materials from their supplies and was arranging them carefully. We need fire for heat and to dry our equipment, he said. Fire? Neela looked confused. We don't have any ignition sources. Ben pulled out 2 pieces of metal from the toolkit and a small pile of dry material he had somehow found. He began striking the metals together, creating sparks that fell onto the tinder. After several attempts, a small flame appeared. Zara watched in amazement as Ben carefully fed the flame with progressively larger materials until they had a proper fire burning inside their shelter. The warmth spread through the small space and their suit systems finally relaxed completely. That's impossible, she whispered. You made fire from nothing. Not nothing, Ben corrected. Basic friction and combustion principles. Every human learns this. Every human? Zara's antennae twitched rapidly. This is advanced survival technique. How do all humans know this? Ben paused in his work. Because we need to. Before Zara could ask what he meant, a new sound reached them through the shelter walls. A low rumbling growl that made her blood freeze. What was that? Neela whispered. Ben's entire demeanor changed. The calm, methodical student disappeared, replaced by something much more alert and dangerous. He moved to the shelter entrance and peered outside. Predator, he said quietly. Large, probably carnivorous. Moving in pack formation. Pack formation? Zara's voice cracked. How can you tell? The sound pattern. 3 different sources, coordinated movement. They're hunting. More growls echoed across the ice, closer this time. Through the tarp, Zara could see shapes moving in the swirling snow. They were large, 4-legged creatures with long claws and sharp teeth visible even at a distance. Our suits have emergency beacons, Neela said frantically. We can call for extraction. That would mean failing the simulation, Ben pointed out. Better than being eaten by simulation monsters, Zara replied, reaching for her emergency controls. Ben caught her hand. Wait, they're just animals. We can handle this. Zara stared at him. Handle this? They're predators designed to hunt prey. We're the prey. Not necessarily. Ben moved back to their supplies and began selecting items. He took the remaining rope, several metal tools, and some of their food supplies. His movements were swift and confident, as if he had done this many times before. What are you doing? Zara demanded. Setting up a perimeter and making noisemakers. Predators usually avoid confrontation if they think the prey might fight back effectively. He slipped out of the shelter before anyone could stop him. Through the entrance, Zara watched him move across the ice with surprising stealth. He placed objects at strategic points around their camp, connecting them with nearly invisible lines of rope. When he returned, the creatures were circling closer. Their growls had changed to a higher pitch, more aggressive and hungry. If they attack, Ben said calmly, stay low and don't run. Running triggers chase instincts. Instead, make yourself look bigger and louder than you are. That's insane, Neela protested. We should hide until they go away. They won't go away. We smell like food to them. As if responding to his words, one of the creatures stepped into the light cast by their fire. It was massive, with thick white fur and predatory eyes that reflected the flames. Its claws left deep marks in the ice as it approached. Suddenly, Ben's trap system activated. Metal objects clanged together as the creature stepped on the hidden ropes, creating a loud, chaotic noise that echoed across the ice. The beast jumped back, startled and confused. Ben immediately stood and began shouting, making himself appear as large as possible. To Zara's amazement, the other team members found themselves copying his actions without thinking. The combined noise and activity made their small group seem much more dangerous than it actually was. The predators circled for several more minutes, but the coordinated display of aggression eventually convinced them to seek easier prey elsewhere. Their growls faded into the distance, leaving the team alone with the howling wind. Incredible, Zara breathed. You drove them off without any weapons. Psychology works on most predators, Ben explained, sitting back down by the fire. They don't want to fight unless they have to. They want easy meals. Zara stared at him with new eyes. In the space of a few hours, Ben had built shelter, created fire, and successfully defended them against dangerous predators, all without relying on advanced technology or weapons. Ben, she said slowly, where exactly did you learn all this? Earth, he replied simply. But Earth is supposed to be a peaceful world, a garden planet with mild weather and friendly animals. Ben looked at her for a long moment. Who told you that? Zara felt confused. Everyone knows that. It's in all the galactic databases. The databases are wrong. That night, while the others slept, Zara used her suit's communication system to access the Academy's advanced research files. She needed to know the truth about Earth and humans. What she found made her question everything she had ever believed. The files marked classified painted a very different picture of Ben's home world. Earth wasn't a garden planet. It was classified as a Class 12 death world, one of the most dangerous planets known to galactic civilization. She read about ice ages that lasted thousands of years, during which humans had not only survived but thrived. She learned about natural disasters that could destroy entire continents, diseases that could kill millions, and predators that made the simulation creatures look harmless. But the most shocking discovery was about humans themselves. They weren't the peaceful, simple species she had imagined. They were persistence hunters who could run prey to exhaustion over distances that would kill most other species. They had healing abilities that allowed them to recover from injuries that would be fatal to almost any other galactic race. The files described humans as apex survivors who had not only conquered their deadly world but had done so while fighting constant wars against each other. Their history was filled with conflicts that had driven them to develop increasingly sophisticated tools and strategies. One report made her blood run cold. Humans possess an unusual psychological trait that compels them to risk their own lives to protect others, even strangers. This behavior appears to be instinctual and cannot be suppressed through logic or fear. Zara looked at Ben sleeping peacefully by their fire, and suddenly understood why he had been so calm throughout their ordeal. For someone who had grown up on a world where everything was trying to kill him, This simulation was probably relaxing. The next morning brought new challenges. A massive storm system moved across their area, bringing winds that threatened to tear apart their shelter and temperatures that dropped even further. Zara's suit systems began failing again under the extreme conditions. "We need to move," Ben announced, studying the approaching storm. "This shelter won't survive what's coming." "Move where?" Neela asked. "There's nothing but ice in every direction." Ben pointed toward a distant ridge. "Those rock formations will provide better protection, but we'll have to travel light and fast." The journey across the ice was the most terrifying experience of Zara's life. The wind tried to knock them down with every step, and the cold bit through their suits like living things. Halfway to the ridge, Neela's suit failed completely. "I can't feel my hands," she gasped, falling to her knees in the snow. Ben immediately stripped off his own outer jacket and wrapped it around her, despite the fact that this left him more exposed to the killing cold. Then he picked her up and carried her the rest of the way to shelter. "You'll freeze," Zara protested, but Ben ignored her. They reached the new shelter just as the worst of the storm hit. Ben's quick thinking had saved all their lives, but Zara noticed that his lips were turning blue from cold exposure. "Why did you do that?" she asked as they huddled together for warmth. "You almost died saving her." Ben looked puzzled by the question. "She needed help. But you could have died. So could she." Zara stared at him, remembering the report about human self-sacrifice instincts. Ben genuinely couldn't understand why she found his action strange. For him, risking his life to save a teammate was as natural as breathing. The simulation ended the next day with their team having successfully survived all challenges. As they emerged from the pods, Zara felt like she was seeing the world through completely different eyes. Dr. Vex congratulated their team on their excellent performance. Ben's leadership and survival skills were exceptional, he noted. It's rare to see such practical application of theoretical knowledge. After class, Zara approached Ben as he gathered his belongings. The other students gave him respectful nods as they passed, word having spread about his performance in the simulation. "Ben," she said quietly, "I owe you an apology." He looked up from his notebook. "For what?" "For everything. For treating you like you were inferior. For mocking your people and your world." She paused, struggling with words. "I had no idea what humans really are." Ben's expression softened. "What do you think we are?" Zara thought about everything she had learned. About the death world that had forged humans into the ultimate survivors. About their impossible combination of intelligence, physical capability, and moral courage. About their willingness to sacrifice themselves for others without hesitation. "Terrifying," she said honestly, "and amazing." Ben smiled for the first time since she had met him. "Earth is a hard world. It makes hard people. But we're not monsters." "No," Zara agreed. "You're something much more dangerous than monsters." "What's that?" "Heroes." From that day forward, Zara made it her mission to learn everything she could about humans and Earth. She discovered that the primitive species she had mocked were actually the most adaptable and resilient beings in known space. Their lack of advanced technology wasn't a sign of weakness, but proof that they didn't need it to survive and thrive. She also learned that humans were just beginning to explore the galaxy. When they finally developed faster-than-light travel and advanced technology to match their incredible natural abilities, they would become a force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. But more importantly, she had learned that Ben's courage and selflessness weren't unique to him. They were quintessentially human traits, forged by countless generations of survival on the most dangerous world in space. As she watched Ben help other struggling students with the same patience he had shown her, Zara realized that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their ability to survive anything the universe could throw at them. It was their determination to help others survive too. The galaxy had no idea what was coming, but Zara did, and she couldn't wait to see what humans would accomplish when they finally claimed their place among the stars. They were going to change everything,